Hi Dilip, how are you?
Hey Vedant, I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, you. One second. How about now? Is that any better?
Just give me a minute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
But I cannot hear you.
Hello? Can you?
Am I still audible?
Yes, you are still audible. Can you hear me now?
But somehow your voice, I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, it's so strange.
Even through the microphone. Just a minute, let me try it once more.
Sure.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's just give me 1 minute. I think it is coming through the phone. I have to switch.
Dilip, you are frozen. I'm getting the circle of death on you right. Okay, there you go. Am I still? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
That's fine. I think it's coming from
I see.
the phone itself.
I
My
see.
earpiece doesn't seem to be connecting. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, when we started this, we've had so many issues figuring this format out. On the first episode, I remember people were saying they couldn't hear me properly because I had my phone just sitting on my computer. It was resting on it and it was affecting the audio. And it's such a task getting a live interview done right. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, but
And
thank you so
getting
much
things
for
to
doing
work
this.
the
I
first
really
time itself
appreciate it.
is like a challenge.
I'm sorry?
Getting things to work the first time itself is like a big challenge.
Oh yes, that is absolutely right. But now that it's
Yeah.
working, we can begin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just so you know, once this live is over, it will be saved and it will be available to listen to on our platform for any of our listeners, any of your listeners who possibly missed it. They can still listen to this interview after the live. But Dilip Kumar, thank you so much for being here on Friday Chats. It is an absolute privilege to get to talk to you, sir.
It's a pleasure being here, and my first Instagram live, and that too with
Oh,
you on manicpod. I think it's a pleasure.
great.
I'm sure it's going to be lovely.
it is going to be awesome. So let's just dive right into the questions. Firstly, Dilip. So
Yeah.
when I was looking you up, you had a very extensive about me section because as a blogger, you've kind of really documented yourself pretty well. And in your about me section, you describe what is actually uh, a very tried and true, well-worn story, you know, and I can relate to it, and almost every single one of my colleagues can relate to it, where you started out in kind of like a corporate setting and it just wasn't agreeing with you, and you found yourself wanting something different. Now, personally, for me, I left advertising to get into kind of the podcasting, more creative space. But I was just wondering, what was the job that made you kind of wish that you weren't working in corporate anymore?
So I come from a finance background, as in I am a finance professional, got all my education, degree, everything in finance. But then, when it happened that I have to get into a job, my field completely changed. And I started off with marketing, sales, customer care, and all of those things. So what I was doing in corporate, I started off like what I said, different kind of, as in there was one point where I was even selling, pagers were pretty new in
Oh, wow.
India, and I was even selling pagers. There was, I think it was Page Me or something.
Right.
So for some time, I was selling pagers. Then I worked with a lot of different outlets as well. And then when I got into corporate, I thought I will use those skills because getting into finance wasn't that easy, and the pay was also that not that great. But sales and marketing, the pay was pretty good. So I felt it's better that I get into sales and marketing, considering all of the experience that I had. So I got into sales and marketing. And then from the entry level, slowly grew up the ladder and reached a senior managerial position where through almost about 10-15 years, I've managed different kind of people, different kind of teams, almost 600-700 people who I've managed, worked in different things. Now if I am to tell you, I am a very hardcore analytics guy. I like analysis, but I worked in different fields. I worked in workforce management. I worked in analytics. I worked in security. So different kind of things. So spread across the last 15-17 years, it's been different roles that I've been into. But this is how I started off, and that's why the senior manager position is where I kind of found that it was I wouldn't say that I didn't like the job, but I felt that that 9 to 5 that you get stuck onto, and then you live from a paycheck to a paycheck. So those were kind of things that I wasn't very comfortable. But if somebody asked me, did I like my job? I absolutely loved my job. That's that was something that got me started in terms of a career. But that's those two things. The freedom of time and money is something that I felt is where I felt that I should maybe look into something like digital marketing.
And you mentioned working, with teams of 600 and, these huge numbers. So what was the transition like for switching to podcasting, where you initially started the podcast, The Taste of India, with your wife, I believe. And I imagine with the Podcasting University, you had to work with a fairly small team. So what was that transition like for you? Was it easy? Did it take some getting used to, of having to shoulder multiple responsibilities? What was that like?
So both of these things were very different. So if I am to say, as in when I said 500, 600, that's over a career. The maximum that I had managed, my team size maximum was about 100, but then still it's a huge team that I managed. But still, when it came to podcasting, and The Taste of India wasn't my first podcast actually. My first podcast was the DK Speaks podcast.
Right.
which I'm kind of rebranding and launching in the month of April as the Affiliate Marketing Simplified podcast. So this was a completely different setup. And when I got into all of these things, I didn't really have anybody working with me. It was just me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started off the Tastes of India podcast, I think in India, podcasting, as in nobody even knew about a podcast. And we just started off because I had experience of podcasting, and we said, okay, maybe radio is something that we can use. And considering that in the past, if you go a little in towards the 80s, when All India Radio was something that we all were glued into. So there was this section where they would talk about recipes. So that is something that kind of told us that if then there was an audience for radio, I'm sure that there will be, and that too for food. I'm sure we will find somebody in even now as well. So when we started off podcasting, what we basically did is we recorded a few episodes. We sent it out to a few of our people that we knew, and we asked them that if we did this on a weekly basis and we released it, would you like to listen to it? And a few people said yes, we would like to listen to it. Then we sent an email out to the email subscribers that we had, and we had a good number of people who were Indian subscribers. So a few of them responded, and they said that they would love to listen to it. And that's where we said, okay, we'll go all out and launch it. And when we released the Taste of India for, I think, about 15, 20 episodes, there was absolutely nobody, there is nothing in terms of a feedback, no listens. We were doing everything, putting in so much of an effort, so all of that. And like what I said, it's just the two of us. So from a transition there, I was delegating, getting things done from people. My job was to ensure that things were getting done, KRAs were achieved, goals were achieved. So that is something that I was doing here. I was back to where I started maybe 15, 20 years back, and doing everything on my own. But the only thing that pushed me to it is the satisfaction that I am doing it for myself, and I am doing something that I like doing. So if you ask me how the transition was, it was difficult, but and more so when you're in that managerial role, and then you go back and have to start all over again. There is that shock that you get into. But then I, like what I said, this was something that I like doing. I was doing it for myself. So I said, okay, so be it. I'll start off once again and maybe reach a point where I can get people to do these things for me. So that's how we transitioned over.
Wow. And it's so crazy because when I was, again, doing some research, I found out that the term podcast was actually first coined in 2004 by a newspaper journalist to describe audio broadcasts that could be listened to on an iPod. And you were starting in the podcasting space in 2009, I believe that was the year you had listed. And just 5 short years from when the term itself had been created, you were working in podcasts. That is such a crazy thing to think about, because podcasting itself didn't really take off until we were in the 2010s. So I'm just that must have been quite a step. And from what you described, it is absolutely. I would have been too scared to take that step. So kudos to you for having taken it before all of us.
Right. And at some point I felt that audio, as in we could relate to audio, and I liked talking. And I've done a lot of sessions. I've done a lot of training. So somewhere I felt that my as an audio is something that I want to get into. So that's how I got into. And like what you said, yeah. When we started off, we didn't have a clue how to go about doing it, and I didn't even know that the term was as in it was podcast. We were calling it audio blogs. And
I see.
How to go about putting that onto the website. So it was, it was a task, and that entire journey was very interesting. There is a lot of things that we went through, and probably that is what uh, paved the way for me to get started with the podcasting university as well.
And speaking of paving the way, you mentioned that one of your inspirations is Yaro Starak, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. What was it specifically about him and what he was doing that caught your attention and made you think, I could do what he does? Or what was it about him?
So, as in initially, to be very frank, as in if I have to talk about my tryst with, as in my first touch of a computer, it was in 2000, 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no clue about how to get started, as in how to boot a computer. So that's how I started off. So somewhere around, I think it was 2004, 2005, when I was searching online. That was when I learned about searching online, and when I came across some of these articles where people were saying that blogging is making money, and the blogging is is where journaling, as in blogging or journaling, where you can write your diary and things like that. So I was just searching online, and the first blog that came on Google search results was that of Yaro Starak. It was called as entrepreneursjourney.com. So I went into that blog, and I read, he had some excellent articles about blogging. There was a lot of information about blogging, and he was the first person on whose website I happened to see the audio blog. He also wasn't calling it a podcast. He was calling it as an audio blog. And that is where I first happened to listen to a podcast. I think it was around 2005, 2006. So he had some very nice articles on the blog, and he had some free guides. So it was one of his guide, I think it was Blog Profit Blueprint or something like that, which I downloaded, which taught me everything about blogging, because that guide was, as in, I don't know why he was giving it away for free. Today, people would have sold that kind of a guide. But he was doing it, and most of the information on his website was free. And if it was being sold, I definitely wouldn't have been able to buy it, because at that point, that wasn't something that I would even think of going and buying. So something that I liked about his blog was that, one, he was trying everything. He was doing everything, and he was doing YouTube videos, he was doing audio blogs, he was writing, and he was earning money. So he was earning good money from his blog, and he was giving away a lot of this information for free as well, without actually charging people. And I felt that his approach of learning different things is something that I could connect with, and that he was somebody who talked about the changing, as in the changing world, as in the changing digital world, and he was somebody who kept saying that you need to keep upskilling, keep upgrading if you want to survive in the digital world. Mm-hmm. That is something that I kind of liked, and I felt that, yes, because I was very inquisitive, I liked learning, so I could connect with it. And when that happened, I just started following him. I started following everything that he was writing. I started downloading his guides. And when I saw that he's giving away information also for free, that again was the second thing that kind of, that I could relate with, saying that, okay, why should everything be paid? There can be things, information, specifically, information can be given free, and you have to give a lot of value before you ask for a sale. Mm-hmm. So he was doing something like that, and I could relate to it. And I felt that, that is the route that I should take. And I just followed it. And that's where my entire blogging started. And then slowly I transitioned into affiliate marketing and all of those things. But that's where I liked him. And he's changed a lot since he launched. Right. Today his blog, I think it's been renamed as Yaro.blog or something like that. Okay. And there's a lot that he's changed. A lot that he's, as in he's developed, he's changed with the change in digital space. So that's something that I could connect.
Right. And I mean, I'm not surprised that it's not the same as it was. As you said, constant updation, constant upscaling is the only way to survive in the tech space. Um, so you mentioned that your first podcast, you're kind of rebranding it and bringing it out again in a new packaging or a new avatar. So I was just wondering, when you were initially working on that podcast, you said you got up till I think about 50 episodes or something like that before eventually you just felt like you didn't want to continue with it. Uh, a lot of our podcasters who start out, many of them, they make one episode, they make a small handful of them, and they just feel like they're not really going anywhere. So I want them to hear from someone who's kind of been there, stopped the podcast and then started something new and has exploded with success. What was the experience like for you when you were during that time when you were watching the episode count pile up, and what were the emotions that you were going through when you decided to end it and try and move on to something new?
So it was frustrating, and like what I said, I am somebody who don't uh, like analytics just for the superficial look of it. I would like to get into a little more in detail. So there was a lot of time that I spent in terms of evaluating what kind of content people were looking for, and it was then that I was creating each of those episodes. So there was a lot of time that I was putting in, and I got as in fair amount of listener base. There was some decent listenership as well, but the problem was that one, I wasn't really able to use that to, because my primary objective with that podcast was to drive traffic using that podcast to one of my websites that I was my blog, and then monetize the traffic that was coming onto that blog, and that wasn't really happening. So that traffic wasn't really coming, and on top of that, all of that podcast, there was a lot of you know there were no actual plugins that could help me embed that podcast player onto my blog, and all of the podcast hosting then were pretty costly. As in, all of them were like about $9-10 per month, and I wasn't ready to spend that money on podcast hosting as well. So when I started off, what I did is I was hosting all of these files on an Amazon S3 server. So all of these files were there, and then I got one of my friends to develop a plugin that can help me generate an RSS feed and also help me embed these audio files on my blog.
Okay.
And he charged me a very small amount, and then he developed this plugin. And that was how I was, that's how I submitted the RSS feed to Apple. And that itself, it was a huge task, because there were some specific requirements that Apple had, and we weren't meeting it. So this guy had to work on the plugin again. So a lot of those things. And then every time WordPress will get updated, there was a problem with this plugin. So I had to go back to him, and he wouldn't have time. So there was a lot of things that I was kind of doing to keep it running, and I wasn't seeing the kind of return that I was expecting from it. I kept producing 50 episodes, and specifically because, from an Indian market perspective, there was no support there. And from a US audience, so it was a little strange, because they weren't able to maybe relate to my language, my tone. So there was this guy. I had a small plugin called a Speak Pipe that was installed on my blog then, which I was using to gather feedback. And there was this one guy who had come and put a feedback as into a small voice note saying, "Speak English, man."
Oh my God.
And I was kind of, I felt really bad there. And so I was feeling a little frustrated, and I felt I was diverting my attention to from a lot many other things to podcasting. I was spending a lot of energy here. There were a lot of things that I was doing which I couldn't focus on. So I said, okay, 50 episodes I've done, and I know I had an understanding of this, but maybe this isn't the right time for me to get into it. So I will stop it for now, and then maybe restart it at some point later. So I stopped it there. But that experience was, and I wouldn't say that it was bad. It was an amazing learning for me, because there were a lot of things that I was able to learn then. which actually helped me when, as in when we relaunched our podcast. So I think that was enriching learning, but it was frustrating as well, very frustrating.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I truly, it hit me right here when you told me the story about that one comment that you received. When I went to the US myself for college, one of the first things that almost everybody would tell me was how good my English was, as though they expected me not to speak it well for some reason. It's just a thing with them, I guess. But yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, for young podcasters now, I feel like they're in that phase where they're living the frustration, but many of them sadly don't hit that realization of, they need to cherish the learning experience. This is like a whole new thing that they're doing for the first time. And I don't know if they just feel like they need to succeed at it nowadays because it's still a pretty risky venture even now with all the podcasting platforms that are now available, all the outlets for help and assistance, and all the learning tools, your platform included, that is available. The fact that podcasting is still such a risky venture, I mean, I don't know if it's even fair to say it's less of a risk now than it was then, but I really do agree with you that young podcasters need to really cherish that learning experience because it's only going to help them in the long run.
Absolutely, yeah. And
So,
that learning is what actually helps in this digital, this digital world. As an
hmm,
internet, if you can't take every of those failures and learn from it, I think you won't be able to survive.
absolutely, I agree. And so you were talking about how you set up an Amazon S3 server and you had a friend of yours helping you with the RSS links, things that are so kind of commonplace now. Creating an RSS link, you can just go to Hubhopper, you can go to Anchor, you can go to manicpod. We all, so many options to have an RSS link created for free now. It is now a free
Right.
service. And so I was just curious about uh, what your setup was like and what it has evolved into. Because I mean, even here at the studio, we have these pretty high-end microphones and things like that. So when you started out, what kind of equipment were you using?
That's a good question. I'm sure you will be surprised that there was no equipment. I only had my laptop, and the inbuilt microphone was what I was using to record.
Oh, I see.
So I would get into a room and close doors and everything. Use my laptop to record the audio, and then I went to some of these YouTube videos to learn how to remove that echo, that noise, and do whatever I can to get the best audio out of that. And that is what, if you listen to the first, I think, 10, 12 episodes of the DK Speaks podcast, it is all recorded on the laptop audio. So I didn't have anything else. But then over a period of time, and to some extent, I would also say that maybe affordability was a problem. Then I would say I probably couldn't afford to go and buy a mic. And second, I also wasn't ready to invest into
Right.
something that I didn't even know if it is going to work. So both of those aspects. But then when we restarted, and after the 10, I think 10 or 15 episodes, I got a lavalier mic, which is something that I was using to record,
Mm-hmm.
and that was there with me for some time. But when it came to the Taste of India, and even for that matter, the Taste of India, I think the first 5-10 episodes, we did the same thing. We used our laptop audio to record. But then we transitioned over. We bought a dynamic mic, and as we progressed, my equipments kind of changed. We have a couple of dynamic mics. We have a condenser mic. I also wanted a mixer primarily because there was some music and all also that I was interested in. So we bought a mixer, and that's the current setup. So over a period of time, the I would say that what people talk about when it comes to podcasting, people would say that you need a a boom arm, a pop filter, a good microphone. So that's the kind of setup that I've got myself now. But when I started off, it was simple.
And actually, I just noticed that one of our old sound engineers actually just joined the conversation, and so that when he joined, it instantly brought the new question into my head, which was when you were working with all this equipment with your laptop primarily, did you have to learn how to edit? Did you have to learn how to fiddle around with the sound while you were starting? Or did you ever learn that over the time that you've been podcasting? Or do you have a
No,
sound engineer?
I learned it because when I initially started off, it was only me doing the recording, editing, and everything. So I learned, and that's where probably some of these editing tools helped me. There were a lot of those videos because there were only a handful of those tools then, and there were videos for those tools on YouTube. So I would go to YouTube, learn, then I would read their documentation, about things that I couldn't kind of figure out. And I learned all of that then, a lot of those things. And when I started off, I didn't get into so deep as to what even the smallest thing on Audacity would be. So I only learned the primary requirements, and so that I can edit and get good audio out of it. And then I got started. But I learned some of those things over a period of time, and it's then that I got the confidence that yes, this is something that I can continue. So absolutely, I learned it.
Yes, because I actually have also started slowly kind of figuring out all these new software and how to work with the audio interface and everything. And it's kind of funny how you approach the technology with this kind of almost fear that borders on reverence, where you're like, this is something that is beyond me. It is this extremely complicated machinery. But then when you actually sit down and start to play with it, you realize that it is very giving software, and you really it's just there to help you get better. And when you start to have fun with it, some really great things can come out of it.
Right, absolutely. Very, very, and sound. It has. There is so much that you can do with it, and some of these
Yes.
softwares are simply amazing. It's if you get into it a little, you can just do wonders to a poor sounding audio as well. So yeah.
Exactly. So we talked about the technical aspects. We talked about the journey from DK Speaks to Tastes of India to now the Podcasting University. So I was listening to your podcast. I started from episode 1, and I'm somewhere around episode 10 midway. And one thing that caught my interest, because I also have 2 podcasts myself, and the biggest struggle for me was guests, because I wanted guests on my shows. But whenever I approached anyone, there was always that fear of rejection. And even when I asked people, they did reject. So you started out as a solo act in your podcast where it was just you giving information. And then in episode 6, I believe, you finally brought a guest on, and they became a more common occurrence in your show. What is the secret to nailing a good guest? Because you really hit the jackpot with your first guest, the kind of guest that most starting podcasters only dream of. So what is the secret sauce to that?
I wouldn't say that there is any secret sauce. Maybe I was lucky, but then some things that maybe my blogging experience, affiliate marketing experiences had taught me is that I had a list of people that I wanted to reach out to, and I wanted to start off with the best and the topmost there. And I knew that the chance of rejection with them was the most. Mm-hmm. And somebody maybe who is a little lower on that list, who is probably not that established a podcaster, might still be okay to come. But somebody who's an established person, my chance of getting rejected there is the most. And what I was doing is I decided is that let me eliminate the ones where I have the most chance of rejection.
Okay.
So that if there is any disappointment that I got rejected, that will all be there in the beginning itself, and then I can get into something which is positive.
Okay.
And all that I did is I was very truthful when I approached Vijay. I told him that it's a brand new podcast, and you are going to be the first guest.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give people, and considering podcasting is new in India, I wanted to give people an insight into what the podcasting world is all about. And I think if I am able to start with you, that will give a push to the entire objective with which I'm starting the podcasting university. So I was truthful to him. I told him that I don't have a lot of audience. It's a beginning. It's a very new show, and I wrote to him. And Vijay, I think, probably one of the nicest guy that I've come across. Very nice, very humble and simple person. And I think that is what makes people like Vijay stand out. And
Right.
For me, that is the definition of success. So for somebody who is so successful but is so humble, and like what I said, about Yaro also, that is something that I really liked about him, because he was that big a blogger then, but when I had written an email to him, he had responded to it, which
Yes.
was something that usually wouldn't happen. So Vijay, he didn't refuse. When I sent him a note, he agreed, and he said, "Okay, I'll come on the show." So partially, I would say maybe I was lucky, and considering that there weren't a lot of podcasts in that specific, with that objective, maybe I got a little lucky. And otherwise, Vijay, I think, is a nice person, and I would be surprised if and there will be a very solid reason for him to reject somebody's request. So that's how I approach this.
Well, can I just say, Dilip, I think I speak on behalf of quite a few podcasters. We all wish we had your luck when we started out looking for guests on our show. But you also, so your podcast is called the Podcasting University, and it's all about learning the craft of podcasting. And I remember actually when I mentioned that I was doing this interview to my family the other day, and when my father heard about it, one of the things he actually asked me was if this was a proper college course, and I told him, no, it's a podcast. And but his question actually got me thinking, if someone came to you and said, I want to take your podcast, I want to take your concept, and I want to turn it into a proper, fully functional college course that I can teach to students over a term, what would the syllabus for that even look like?
I would say that's a very difficult question. But then, I somehow think that from an education perspective, I think a lot of these things aren't something that is really taught in schools, and or for that matter in colleges. So things like these, and if I am to say, podcasting, I think is something that is the best tool for an introvert to, gain that confidence in talking, talking with people, talking to an audience. So these are things that can bring in a lot of confidence in people and prepare them for the world that they are going to get into, a world that is changing every minute. And I think that is something that we have never focused on in terms of education. But if this was to become a course, and if from a syllabus perspective, I think more what podcasting is and what are the things to get started with podcasting is going to be just a small part of it. But more than that, I think it will be about preparing people to stay there. As in sustenance is a very important aspect. So preparing people to persist and not give up, keep doing, keep learning. So I think the syllabus need to cover all of those things and then come to the aspect of what podcasting is and how to get started with podcasting, because this is going to be a very small topic, and just teaching somebody how to get started with a podcast isn't going to be enough, because like what you said, anybody can start a podcast, but then the problem is continuing with it. So I think the syllabus need to look a lot more at those aspects than teaching somebody about what podcasting is all about.
So we've actually been getting a couple of comments right now. So if I could just read the first one. It's from Woman Spiria Podcast. She says, "Beyond luck, it's the sincerity and consistency Dilip sir has been showing that has brought him great laurels." And then the second one is from Indian Noir. "Dilip is being humble. He provided a great brief about what the interview was going to be about and the questions he was going to ask. I think his blogging experience helps him tease out great nuggets of wisdom from the interview subject." I'm getting firsthand experience right now about how true those statements are myself. And Indian Noir, as I understand it, is a pretty big podcast. So for them to come out and make that statement, that's very, very impressive. So
I'll thank Indian Noir and Women's Media both. So so those are I think, and I'm happy if they think like that. But then I would say.
But I'm actually going to take those. I'm actually going to take those comments and hopefully use them in the future, because those are some really great points that they have made for any interviewer starting out with a podcast. Okay, Dilip. So I want to end the interview with one final question. As someone who was there, I guess you could say at the beginning, and as someone who is only going from strength to strength, and as someone who has, from what it sounds, an incredible amount of cachet in the podcasting space, what is your outlook on where the podcasting space, or the market, if you want to use that word, where do you think it is going in India? And where do you think we'll be in the next, let's say, 5 years?
So, I somehow feel that we, as in the Indian market, kind of shapes a lot of things, a lot of the way sales, marketing, the way products are created. A lot of these things in the Indian market kind of shapes these ideas. And just to give you a perspective, if I look at it as in podcasting has been there for quite some time, but over the last 4 or 5 years is when it kind of took off, maybe primarily because of the mobility feature and smartphones having all of these options, smartphones becoming your computer. So it's taken off over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's when the podcasting has got that push. But podcasting, not a single host has ever produced, as in given out a free hosting, if I remember, even until about 5-6 years back.
Okay.
When it came to India, podcast hosting was free. And you could just start off with your smartphone and you can just start, creating a podcast and host it for free. And slowly what is happening is other companies who are giving only a paid option to subscribers, to podcasters, are also switching over to that free option. And they are acquiring companies, like, for example, the acquisition by Libsyn right now of Oxbus, and then they've launching it as Libsyn Studio, which is a free service. Libsyn is something that I absolutely liked when I started off with podcasting as well, but they were always a paid platform. And same is the case with a lot many other things. There have been, in the FMCG market, if you see, there have been companies who were always offering big bottles of some of these daily care products. But in India, we wanted those small sachets. And even those big companies came to India, and then they changed their strategy to introduce those sachets. Today, sachets is something that that came just maybe because of our buying habits or our habits. And so a lot of these things kind of is shaped by the way we, the Indian consumers, behave. And if I'm to talk about podcasting, India has become the third largest market. And with the series of acquisitions and the funding that has happened over the last year, 2021, I think podcasting is going to go as in it is going to surpass maybe video or textual content for that matter. And because the barrier to entry is pretty low, I think it is very early even now. Over the next 4 or 5 years, there is going to be a huge change, and podcasting is going to just explode. And there is a lot of opportunity that we'll see, and something that I'm still watching out, and I keep checking every time is that today, if I look at audio, audio isn't something that any search engines are even looking at. Right. Because search engines are only focused on textual content today, and they're also ranking videos as well. But again, text in the videos. So today, podcasting, they're using text to look at podcasts as well. But at some point, when we have that technology, which might help audio as well in terms of search, or maybe a search engine that is specifically for audio, when these kind of things come, then this entire the podcast this thing is going to, the environment is going to change, the entire podcasting network is going to change, and there is going to be a lot more opportunity. So I think it is very early even now, and from an Indian market perspective, we will have a lot of opportunities from a podcasting perspective. And I think if anybody wants to get into podcasting, I think this is the right time that they should get into podcasting. Anybody, it could be brands, companies, whatever. So this is the time that they should get it.
Well, can I just say that you've made me very excited to see what the next 5 years looks like after that answer. But thank you so much, Dilip, for coming on to our interview, Friday Chats. It has been an absolute pleasure. And like Indian Noir said, truly some absolutely golden nuggets of wisdom you have shared with us tonight. And so I just want to say that, with manicpod, we are so excited to be a part of that journey that we're going to go on in the next 5 years, with the free podcast hosting. And we've even introduced this concept called micropods or micro podcasting. Yeah, where people can do 3 minutes or less, and they can do it straight from their phone as well. And it's so fascinating that you mentioned audio blogs, because that is something that we also offer on our platform, where bloggers, text bloggers, can convert their blogs using text-to-speech software into audio, and they can showcase it on our platform as well. So I think it was such a serendipitous moment when you mentioned audio blogs. So, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. Thank you so much, Dilip, once again, on behalf of everyone here at manicpod. We were so happy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me, Vedanta. It was very nice talking to you, and I think some very interesting questions. Some of the things that maybe probably not a lot of people will actually get into. So some very interesting, intriguing questions. So very nice, and thanks a lot for having me here. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, and like I mentioned at the start, this interview will be saved. So if anybody who wasn't able to check in on the live, they can, of course, listen to this at a later date at their own convenience. So for anyone who missed out on the live, you haven't missed the wisdom. Thank you so much, Dilip. I'll be signing off now.
Thanks, Vedanta.
All right. Good night.
Good night.